There are many reasons for why cities form. A city can form because of vast coastline, deep sea water ports, proximity to industrious markets, its distance to an interstate, economies of scale brought on by indivisible inputs or specialized labor, geography, etc. The most important reason, though, is one that is a little more straightforward and simple. It is about the comparison between firms that are clustered close together and those that are isolated in rural areas. In an isolated site, the firm faces a perfectly inelastic supply of labor. The firm hires the same number of workers in times of high demand and in times of low demand, whereas in a cluster, firms face a perfectly elastic supply of labor, which causes the number of people employed by the firm to drop drastically, for profit to fall, and for wages to stay the same in times of low demand and vice versa. In other words, in good times, firms and cities employ far more people and make far more profit than isolated ones, but in bad times, isolated firms employ the same amount of people as they did before, make the same amount of profit, and workers who are employed there will only suffer pay cuts. The shaded triangles are triangles in high demand. The checkered ones are profit and low demand. This can be calculated by taking the areas of the triangles. When a country becomes stable and experiences broad trends that produce high demand and a stable dollar, cities tend to do well. Cities in and of themselves are good indicators of how the country is doing, and of course, it's all relative to how the city has done in the past as well. Detroit is also a special case over the past 30 years or so, as globalization has become a largely influential force causing manufacturing to leave us. It has forced Detroit to make a painful transition from being a localization economy, or a city based on one industry, the auto industry, to an agglomeration economy, or a city based on many industries and emerging markets. In 2008, we experienced what people are now calling the Great Recession. Detroit, Michigan was hit especially hard, already going through hard times and went through what seemed like a killing blow. It's very hard, the auto industry, on the verge of collapse and unemployment skyrocketing. It seemed like the then 307-year-old city was showing its age. These two effects, combined with a collapsing housing market, squeezed it almost to death. In 2013, I moved to Detroit to go to school at Wayne State University. There was a lot of stigma, a lot of comparisons being made to Flint. It has not been your typical university experience, as it happens to be smack dab in the middle of everything, and also one of the most racially, religiously, and generationally diverse places I've ever been to. Moving from Flushing, Michigan, it came to me as quite a shock. The point of this essay is to move past that, to let you know there is good growing like an oak tree there. Here are some of the wonderful people that have made a spectacular impact on me and my growth. First one is her name is Anna Tanasova. I sat 2 rows behind Anna and 1 seat to the left in French 1010. It was my freshman year at Wayne, and I was just beginning to find my bearing. Being the first day, it is customary, especially in language classes, to say where you're from and sound off on some miscellaneous facts about yourself. Anna was a political philosophy major. I was kind of curious, and she was kind of cute, so I approached her after class asking to go to coffee. She didn't give me a verbal response. Rather, she saw the phone in my hand and grabbed it from me. She put her number in it and threw it back to me, and was picked up by a dark-haired stranger. I was left kind of confused and a little intimidated. And it was my first introduction to the city, and a pretty good embodiment of what it is and where it is going. She's blunt, witty, honest, superstitious, analytical, sometimes to her own ruin, realistic, poor, competent, tough, intelligent, and pretty aggressive. She didn't really ask for your opinions or perspective. Rather, she beat them out of you. Putting gaps in knowledge on display with ease. Although our ideologies were fairly similar, she forced me to reevaluate my explanations and add substance to my opinions. Granted, this was a fairly easy task, considering I was barely into my major of politics at the time. My point is that it was a wake-up call and launched me into a new way of thinking about things, being prepared for opposing points of view. Through our conversations, she has let me know that, much like the city of Detroit, she has had a pretty checkered past. I'm not here to share that dirty laundry, but it does involve heavy drug use, partying, poverty, the Detroit hardcore punk scene, and much more. She was only 24. This contributed to the way she dressed and her general demeanor. I have a devil-may-care type of attitude towards things I don't really understand or care to understand, and this part of my attitude showed itself a few times during our interactions. If I had to characterize it in one line of dialogue, it would be this. Anna, I can't hang out later. I'm aligning this girl's chakras and working on her with some healing stones. Stones? You can do that? Are my chakras out of whack? Waves hands around. Are you Gandalf or something? And then she responds, You're pissing me off. You don't know anything about it, so stop bashing it. Just like that, she would let you know how she was feeling, what she was thinking at that exact moment. This type of conversation was a major departure from Flushing, where nobody wants to step on any toes or be politically incorrect. I couldn't say or do anything thoughtless around her because she would call me out on it. She forced thoughtful conversation and insight. She demanded it. It seemed like anything else was a waste of her time. You couldn't feign any emotion or opinion. Condescension and pretentiousness, the feces of conversation, didn't exist in her world. That's a part of her that I really admired. It's also the part of her that, to me, made her the embodiment of the city. In order for its natives to thrive or do something wonderful, you can't waste time and you have to mine human capital and perspective from everyone to create something that's worthwhile there. You don't get much help, so you have to become better at every single turn. Entering university, Anna came as an electric shock to my suburban white middle-class upbringing. She is the antithesis of what people from my demographic usually thought of people who did drugs, painted, made little money, and went to raves. Here's a little more about her. She knows 5 languages. She has the most diverse music playlist of anyone I've ever met. She dropped out of college this year and is now running her own record shop called Paramita Sound in West Village, and more recently her own record label, Barbed Wire Recordings. She also has accepted the offer to become the official DJ at Shinola Watch Company. Point number 4. Her parents are poor Russian immigrants. She is Christian. She is a DJ. She has bartended at many different places, and she's a painter and a sculptor. Anna set the tone for the way I wanted to learn at school and how I interacted with people and drew information from them. I don't claim to be helping the city of Detroit, with maybe the exception of my money going to the university and my tax dollars going into the city government. But I will say that Anna is a mover and a shaker there. She has made a mark on the canvas and she's unapologetic about it. Person number 2, Dr. Michael McFerrin. He's my economics professor for the last 2 semesters. After 2 semesters of being taught by grad students reading off PowerPoint presentations, I began to question whether or not I should remain an economics major. I was good at it, but was it something I could be passionate about? In order to find out, I took a graduate level course called Urban and Regional Economics 5800 to really challenge myself. The teacher was Dr. Michael McFerrin. Mike is about 5'11" with a gray parted hair on the top of his head. He usually wore a button-up shirt with the top 2 buttons undone, and whenever he would explain something incredibly complicated, he would suddenly become interested in what was written on the label of the back of a dry erase marker he was holding. He prefers to do some things the old-fashioned way, like crazy mental math tricks and writing everything down with a pen and not a computer. The class lasted for 3 to 4 hours and was held once a week. Mike had a fairly unconventional style of teaching. Instead of preparing a PowerPoint, he would write out concepts, graphs, and lists as he was lecturing, flailing around from one side of the dry erase board to the other. As it turns out, Mike is a genius stuck on a hedonic treadmill. Let me give you some background. Receiving his undergrad at Wabash College in philosophy and his law degree at U of M, Ann Arbor, shortly thereafter, he pursued 2 PhDs at the same time, one in economics and one in philosophy. The former requires incredible mathematical skills, and the latter requires a substantial amount of writing. Mike completed the requirements for both degrees and was only left with the dissertations. Unfortunately, he had to start working to feed himself and pay bills and could not complete either PhD. Now he's a lawyer by day, working for a firm that defends cops and firefighters on the stand, and an adjunct professor at night. This explained a lot. It seemed he was better at math than most engineers I know, and he had more analytical prowess than my philosophy teacher than from the semester before. Anytime he explained anything in a class, he did so with vast enthusiasm and little effort. One of his talents was breaking down the mathematical origins of different growth models, how the actual economists or mathematicians actually formed the model, and what their train of thought was. Most teachers would give you the model, tell you how to manipulate it, memorize it, call it a day. Mike's teaching experience was much more realistic and practical. He would force us to apply concepts, not to memorize them. A lot of exam problems would usually start with the words, "You are a financial advisor to the Central Bank of Taiwan," or "A company has consulted you about what kind of building they should move into and how far away from the riverfront it should be." Every exam was written in his words. Every class I attended, I felt a little more enlightened and a little more fired up. For every economic concept, Mike could find a way to apply it to the city or to current events. He even used Gary Becker's models for crime to discern whether being illegally parked in Ferndale was worth it in the long run. Hint, it totally is if you live there. He's also the only person I know to quote Bob Dylan and Milton Friedman within the same hour. One evening after class, I followed Mike out and had a conversation with him. It went something like this. So is it true you were super close to getting 2 PhDs at the same time? Yes, unfortunately, life happened for me and I just couldn't complete it. I felt pretty awful about it, and there was nothing I could do at the time. Don't you think you could go back and finish? What, would it still count? Not really. There's a limit on time for when you can go back and write the dissertation. I've exceeded that by quite a bit. Plus, it's not really worth it anyway. Nobody would hire a 55-year-old man out of grad school. Besides, I didn't have the time back then, and I don't have the time to do it now. It really is an incredible amount of writing and research, Sawyer. Why don't you run for political office? Defending public servants on the stand and teaching today's kids in Detroit is a pretty good soundbite for a campaign. Also, I have to say that I was watching the Republican debate last night, and I'm fairly sure that you would tear any of those clowns apart. You can be intelligent without sounding pedantic. Thanks for the endorsement. My only fear would be that some people I used to sell drugs to in college would come out of the woodworks and try to smear me. It was 35 years ago, but it can still happen. I mean, look at Obama. He smoked in college and people are still crucifying him for it. Maybe if they legalize pot, I'll give it some thought. I think if that happens, it would make the country far more receptive to my running for president. That makes sense. Mike's astuteness, enthusiasm, and practical way of teaching has made a large impact on my life and my fellow students' lives as well. A genius on a hedonic treadmill. Someone displaced in history. I constantly envision what might have happened if he completed it or achieved an incredibly prominent place in academia, whether they would consult him on Fox News or work for the Department of Labor. I couldn't help but get the feeling that in some parallel world he would be a household name. I'm so glad he got to teach me, though. His path is out of the ordinary, and his insight and eccentricities have caused ripples in the lives of many. Third person, Tammy Lakey. I see Tammy on a regular basis. She's usually the barista whenever I walk into the Bottom Line coffee shop, a cool little place just off 3rd that's not too far from my apartment. They serve tasty coffee and host open mic nights and poetry slams every other Friday. I like going there and more than I do the UGL to study, partially because there's just enough background noise to keep my mind focused. Usually that background noise is crunchy vinyl playing or thoughtful students from CCS and Wayne State conversing. The demographics are also interesting. The age range spans from 19 to 80 years old, and I've talked to just about every race and religion in there. Some incredibly successful graphic designers with a luxury loft downtown, some homeless and looking for someplace warm. Usually they'd be napping in the most secluded part. It was a curious and refreshing environment. Tammy is reserved at first, but opens up quickly if you engage her. She makes good coffee, too. She went to U of M and studied English. She has brown, bushy hair, somewhat of a semi-fro. She normally has baggy sweatpants on and a shirt with sleeves that only moved a little bit further than her elbows. At the moment, she is working on a large portfolio of poetry in hopes of one day being published. After a few visits with her and much prodding, she shared one of her poems with me. It went like this. My people. At a restaurant in Beirut, I wonder if these are really my people. They echo the part of me that thrives on Fairuz music in the morning, the 10-minute goodbyes after a sahra, and the labna that's always on the table. I'm comforted by the thought of having another piece that I can ration myself into, a layer that I can add to the feet I walk on. A nice thought, but when the power goes out, no one else notices. I read it 2 times over and had an idea of what it was about, but the end was puzzling. Our dialogue went something like this. What does this last bit mean? The part about the power going out. That horrible atrocity that are committed there and no one in the world notices or cares. You know how everyone was so quick to come together for Paris? How everyone changed their profile picture and posted Facebook statuses? The day before there was a massacre in Beirut, and few covered it or cared. That's what that last bit is about. The lights go out and nobody cares. Gosh, I wasn't even aware of that happened. I feel bad. I couldn't believe it. I had no idea. I usually try to keep up with what's going on in the world, but that was ridiculous. I put myself in her shoes for a second. Imagine if you moved to Canada and 9/11 happened, and only 1 or 2 outlets covered it. Tammy made me look at the media with a critical eye that day and helped me understand that what many immigrants go through. I would never completely understand that frustration, but she helped a little bit with what it's like. Next person is Sam Ziola. I met Sam by mistake. For a while, I was going to a hipster gentrification-y place called the Social Club right on campus. It was about $30 for a haircut, and I had enough. I looked around the internet for any place that might be cheaper. I found one downtown that was dubbed Standard Barber. It had just opened. I called the number that was on Google, and a grumbly old voice greeted me through a telephone line that resembled a satellite phone out of Vietnam. I made the appointment, and it was on my way. I biked downtown to Standard and was right on time. I gave them my name and appointment time, and a bearded hipster at the desk let me know that they were not that there was no appointment. There must be some kind of mistake. I made the appointment 3 years ago. Or 3 hours ago, sorry. 3 hours ago. Who did you talk to? Some guy named Sam. He had an accent. Sorry, dude, we don't have you in here. I called the number that I used 3 hours earlier. The same voice greeted me. Are you the barber downtown Detroit? Yeah, I'm waiting for you. Where are you? I'm at Standard Barber. Where are you? I'm on the second floor of the Chrysler House. Alright, I'm on my way. Hurry up already. Yeesh! Click. I opened up my phone and typed it in, only 5 minutes away. I got there as fast as I could. After chaining my bike up, I walked in and immediately fell out of place. The lobby had these beautiful marble pillars with recently buffed green and white tile. I was surrounded by a few shops that I assume I probably couldn't afford. Busy men in suits and women with earrings more expensive than a year of college tuition were talking and looking quite busy. Spotting the barber shop upstairs, I made my way over. The place was simple and clean. Coming up to the door, one could see the entire shop. It was surrounded by glass. The middle of the floor had a black, red, and white checker design, and the outline of the room was a distressed beige. I entered the room, and the only person in there was a little bald Italian man with shaving cream on his face. Give me a minute. The words poured from his mouth like jagged rocks. He was looking into his own mirror, taking care of his 12 o'clock shadow. Afterward, he called me up and draped a maroon cloth over me and tied it around my neck. A moment of silence passed by. Is anything wrong? Who did this to you? This is some of the worst work I've ever seen. He began to cut my hair furiously and handed me a mirror so I could look at my hair. You see that? That is so uneven. The part is all crooked and the nape is all wrong. Where did you get this last done? The social club in Midtown. Well, some people need to go to school a little bit longer before they can cut hair. This is awful. Now I have to go and fix everything. You need to take those sideburns down, young man. They're supposed to end at the middle of the ear. Yes, sir. 21 years of being alive and a haircut had never started out quite like that. As he cut away my hair, he kept finding things that were wrong. How long have you been here? I've been cutting hair here for 61 years. My mouth dropped. I couldn't believe it. So you've seen the city rise and fall, huh? Yep, I fought in the Korean War and moved right here after I got out. Been here ever since. Why a barber? My father always told me it was the only job where you always have work. People always need their haircut. I felt like a history textbook was cutting my hair. This guy saw Martin Luther King Jr. walk down Woodward. He saw the city boom, the riots, the mass migration to the suburbs, and the corruption of Kwame Kilpatrick, and all of that. You wouldn't have guessed it, though. None of that history or life experience appeared to weigh on him. The thing that stuck out to me the most about this little Italian barber was that he was smiling. He was smiling the whole damn time. If anyone off the street walked in and observed the way he cut hair, only one word would come to their mind: joy. He handed me the mirror with nothing but pride on his face. You look like a new man. You look cleaned up. I tipped him extra and thanked him. Last person. Tyrone was about 60 years of age. His name is Tyrone. Tyrone was about 60 years of age and was in my math class. He was always in front of the class with his yellow legal pad ready to take notes. He was incredibly enthusiastic and always asking questions. I asked him why he decided to come back to school after retiring, and his only answer was to keep himself busy, stay sharp. This was mighty impressive to me, as I have trouble motivating myself to do homework sometimes. We talked about music quite a bit. And vinyl records. One day, out of the blue, he brought an old Temptations record to class and placed it on my desk. I couldn't believe it, but I couldn't believe it. He made me promise to him to listen to it and tell him what I thought. Here are some direct quotes from him that I would sometimes write down on my phone whenever he said something interesting. Quote, I have hip problems, Sawyer. That's why I can't run. Stay away from big women and Jack Daniels. Quote number 2. Some people like to clean their house or run or whatever while they listen to music, but me, I sit and listen to music. Just sit and listen. This is my conclusion. The influence we have on our environment and on people can have incredible ripple effects. To unapologetically be oneself is vital for growth. People don't write about people who are products of their environment. Rather, they write about the rebels, the misfits, the vagabonds. Detroit is moving forward with people like that at the helm. The Tammys, who aren't afraid to open up people's eyes over a cup of coffee. the Annas who better themselves not just for the ego but for the environment they are in, the Mikes whose enthusiasm and refusal to become cynical about their own failures can still adapt and change the lives of many, the Sams who create a pillar of industry and who create a pillar of industry and love that remains untarnished by time or history, and the Tyrones who refuse to let their old age stop their pursuit of happiness. It is important to follow their example, to be great, big, beautiful disruptions.
Yes!